The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clattered against the concrete floor of my garage, echoing through the silence like a gunshot. I cursed under my breath, wiping sweat from my forehead with the back of my hand, leaving another dark smudge to join the collection already there. It was past midnight, and I should have been home hours ago, but Chelsea's Toyota had been making that grinding noise again, and I'd rather fix it now than listen to her complain about it tomorrow. That's when I heard her voice drifting through the thin walls that separated my auto shop from the small office in back. At first, I thought she was on the phone with a client. Chelsea worked in real estate, and those people called at all hours. But then I heard the laughter. Low, sultry. The kind of laugh she used to give me back when we were dating 15 years ago. "Oh, Mark, you're terrible," she giggled. Mark, not a client. Mark Davis from her office, the golden boy with the perfect smile and the BMW that never needed repairs because he bought a new one every 2 years. Mark Davis, who had a wife named Laura and 2 kids in Little League. Mark Davis, who always shook my hand a little too firmly at office parties while looking right through me like I was invisible. I crept closer to the office door, my work boots silent on the oil-stained concrete. The door was cracked open just enough for me to hear every word, every breathy whisper, every sound that confirmed what I'd been trying not to think about for the past 6 months. "I can't stop thinking about last night," Chelsea was saying, her voice dropping to that husky whisper she used to reserve for me. "When you did that thing with your tongue?" I backed away from the door like it was on fire, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I was sure she'd hear it. My wife of 12 years was having phone intimacy with her coworker at midnight in my office, probably sitting in my chair, maybe even looking at the photo of our wedding day that I kept on my desk like some kind of pathetic monument to better times. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The rational part of my brain, the part that had built this garage from nothing, that could diagnose engine problems by sound alone, that had somehow convinced a woman like Chelsea to marry a grease monkey like me, that part was already calculating, already planning. But the rest of me, the part that still remembered what it felt like to believe in forever, just wanted to put my fist through something. Instead, I grabbed my keys and walked out into the cold October night, leaving Chelsea to her phone call and her lies, and her complete ignorance of the fact that her world was about to come crashing down around her perfectly manicured feet. 3 days later, I was sitting in the cramped office of Tony Ritchie, private investigator, watching him slide a manila envelope across his desk like he was dealing cards in some high-stakes poker game. Tony looked exactly like what Central Casting would order for a small-town PI. Rumpled suit, 5 o'clock shadow at 10 in the morning, and eyes that had seen too much of humanity's worst impulses. "Your wife's not very careful," Tony said, lighting up his 3rd cigarette since I'd walked in. "Most cheaters at least try to be discreet. These two act like they're starring in their own romantic movie." I opened the envelope and immediately wished I hadn't. Photo after photo of Chelsea and Mark holding hands at restaurants I couldn't afford, kissing in the parking lot of the Lakeside Motel, entering and leaving his lake house while his wife was out of town. In one particularly brutal shot, Chelsea was wearing the red dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. The one she claimed she'd never worn because it wasn't quite right. "Hotel receipts," Tony continued, sliding another stack of papers toward me. "Always the same room, always paid for with his credit card. Your wife's got expensive taste. They've been ordering room service champagne every time." I stared at a receipt dated 3 weeks ago, the same night Chelsea had told me she was working late on the Morrison property deal. The same night I'd fallen asleep on the couch, waiting for her to come home, waking up at 3 a.m. to find her side of the bed still cold. "How long?" I asked, my voice sounding strange and distant even to my own ears. Based on what I could track down, at least 8 months, probably longer. Tony stubbed out his cigarette and immediately reached for another. Started around the time they began working together on that new development project. Classic workplace affair. Long hours, shared goals, all that emotional intimacy. 8 months. While I'd been working 16-hour days to keep the garage afloat, while I'd been skipping meals to make sure we could afford her car payments and her gym membership and her weekly trips to the salon, she'd been building a whole secret life with another man. "There's something else," Tony said, and the tone of his voice made me look up from the photos. "The guy's wife doesn't know yet. Laura Davis seems like a nice lady from what I could dig up. Volunteers at the kids' school. Runs the church, bake sale, that whole suburban mom thing. She's got no idea her husband's been playing house with your wife." An idea began forming in the back of my mind. Dark and satisfying, like the first sip of whiskey after a long day. "You got her contact information." Tony raised an eyebrow but slid a business card across the desk. "Laura Davis, interior design consultant. Her home number's on the back." "But Jake, whatever you're thinking." "I'm thinking she deserves to know the truth," I said, pocketing the card along with the envelope of evidence. "Don't you think she deserves to know the truth?" Tony shrugged and lit his cigarette. "Truth's a dangerous thing, Jake. Has a way of blowing up in everyone's faces, not just the guilty parties." I stood up and pulled out my wallet, counting out the bills for Tony's fee. Sometimes things need to blow up before you can build something better. Laura Davis answered her phone on the third ring, her voice cautious but polite. "Hello, Mrs. Davis. You don't know me, but I think we need to talk. It's about your husband and my wife." The silence stretched so long I wondered if she'd hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, smaller, like she was bracing for impact. "Who is this?" "My name is Jake Mitchell. My wife is Chelsea Mitchell. She works with your husband at Prestige Properties." Another pause, and then, "I see. And what exactly do you think we need to discuss, Mr. Mitchell?" I had to admire her composure. Most people would have started screaming or crying or demanding explanations. Laura Davis sounded like she was conducting a business meeting, all professional courtesy and controlled emotion. "I have some photographs I think you should see, and some hotel receipts and some other things that might interest you." This time the pause was shorter. "Where would you like to meet?" We agreed on Murphy's Diner, the kind of place where the coffee was strong, the pie was homemade, and the booths were high enough to provide privacy for difficult conversations. I arrived 15 minutes early and chose a corner booth where I could watch the door, spreading the contents of Tony's envelope across the scratched Formica table like I was laying out evidence for a jury. Laura Davis walked in at exactly 2, and I recognized her immediately from the family photos on Mark's desk at the office Christmas party. She was prettier in person than in pictures, with auburn hair pulled back in a neat ponytail and intelligent green eyes that took in everything without seeming to stare. She wore a simple blue sweater and jeans, but something about the way she carried herself suggested she was used to being the most competent person in any room. She slid into the booth across from me and looked down at the photos without flinching. "How long have you known?" 3 days. "How long have you suspected?" She picked up one of the hotel receipts and studied it like she was memorizing every detail. 6 months, maybe longer. Mark's always been a terrible liar, but he's been getting sloppy lately, working late every night, taking phone calls in the garage, buying new clothes and claiming they were gifts from his mother. She set the receipt down carefully and looked directly at me. "Your wife is very beautiful." "So are you," I said, and meant it. "That's not why this happened." "No, I suppose it isn't." She picked up another photo, this one showing Chelsea and Mark kissing outside the lakeside motel. "What do you want from me, Mr. Mitchell?" "Jake. And I want the same thing you want." "You don't know what I want." I leaned back in the booth and studied her face. Laura Davis was angry. I could see it in the tight line of her mouth, the way her fingers gripped the edge of the table. But it was a cold, controlled anger, the kind of anger that planned and calculated and waited for the perfect moment to strike. "You want them to pay," I said. "You want them to understand what it feels like to have their world fall apart. You want them to know that actions have consequences." She was quiet for a long moment, still looking through the photos. Finally, she raised her eyes to meet mine. "What did you have in mind?" "The thing about Mark," Laura said, stirring sugar into her third cup of coffee, "is that he's never faced real consequences for anything in his life. His parents bailed him out of every mistake. His first wife was too timid to call him on his, and I've been cleaning up his messes for 8 years because I thought that's what good wives do." We'd been talking for 2 hours, and I was beginning to understand that I'd seriously underestimated Mark Davis's wife. Behind the suburban mom exterior was a woman with a sharp mind and a long memory for grievances. She'd been cataloging Mark's lies and betrayals for years, building a case like a prosecutor preparing for trial. "He thinks I don't know about the money he's been skimming from his client accounts," she continued. "Small amounts, nothing that would trigger an audit, but enough to pay for hotel rooms and expensive dinners and whatever jewelry he's been buying for your wife." Jewelry? This was the first I'd heard about jewelry. Laura reached into her purse and pulled out a credit card statement, pointing to a charge from Brennan's Fine Jewelry for $800. Last month, same day as one of their hotel visits. "I'm guessing your wife has some new earrings or a bracelet she told you came from a girlfriend?" I thought about the diamond pendant Chelsea had been wearing lately, the one she claimed was a bonus gift from her boss for closing the Henderson deal. Another lie in an apparently endless series of lies. "Here's what I think we should do," Laura said, leaning forward with the intensity of a general planning a military campaign. "We don't confront them directly. That just gives them a chance to spin the story, make excuses, maybe even blame us for driving them into each other's arms. Instead, we let them expose themselves." "How?" She smiled, and for the first time since she'd walked into the diner, she looked genuinely happy. "Mark's biggest weakness is his ego. He can't resist showing off, especially when he thinks he's getting away with something, and your wife seems to enjoy the thrill of sneaking around. So, we give them exactly what they want. We make it easier for them to be careless." The plan she outlined was elegant in its simplicity. We would start attending the same social events, making sure to be seen together in public. Nothing romantic, just two people who had discovered they had mutual friends and similar interests. Mark and Chelsea would assume we were clueless about their affair, which would make them bolder, more reckless. "Mark loves to be the center of attention," Laura explained. "If he thinks he's pulling one over on both of us, he'll start taking bigger risks, making bigger mistakes. And when he does, we'll be ready to document everything." "What about your kids?" Her expression hardened. "What about them? They deserve to know what kind of man their father really is. Not all at once, not in a way that traumatizes them, but they're not stupid. They've already noticed that Daddy's never home anymore, that Mommy and Daddy don't talk to each other except to argue about schedules and money." She was right, of course. Kids always knew more than adults gave them credit for. They just didn't always have the vocabulary to express what they sensed. "There's something else," Laura said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I want them to know what it feels like to lose everything. Not just their marriage, their reputations, their careers, their social standing. I want them to understand that betrayal has a price." I looked across the table at this woman I'd met 3 hours ago, this suburban mom with the neat ponytail and the intelligent eyes, and realized I was looking at someone who could be far more dangerous than Mark or Chelsea had ever imagined. "When do we start?" I asked. The Lakefield Chamber of Commerce mixer was exactly the kind of event Chelsea loved and I usually avoided. A room full of people in expensive clothes making small talk about property values and tax assessments, while drinking wine that cost more per bottle than I made in a day. But tonight was different. Tonight, I had a purpose. Laura was already there when I arrived, standing near the appetizer table in a black dress that was both elegant and understated. She'd done something different with her hair, letting it fall loose around her shoulders, and I noticed several men stealing glances in her direction. When she saw me, she smiled and waved like we were old friends. "Jake, I'm so glad you could make it," she said, loud enough for the people around us to hear. "How's the garage business?" "Can't complain. How's the interior design world treating you?" We fell into easy conversation, discussing neutral topics like the weather and the upcoming town festival. But I was watching the room, waiting for Chelsea and Mark to arrive. They walked in together, not holding hands, but standing just a little too close, the way people do when they're trying to hide an intimate connection. Chelsea spotted me first, and I saw the surprise flicker across her face before she composed herself and headed over. She was wearing the red dress again, the one from the hotel photos, and she looked stunning. It occurred to me that this might be the last time I'd ever see her as my wife, instead of as the woman who'd betrayed me. "Jake, what are you doing here?" she asked, kissing my cheek and greeting. "You hate these things." "Laura convinced me to come," I said, gesturing to my new friend. "Chelsea, this is Laura Davis." Laura, my wife, Chelsea. The two women shook hands, and I watched their faces carefully. Chelsea's smile was polite but wary. She recognized the name but couldn't quite place it. Laura's expression was perfectly friendly, giving no hint that she knew exactly who Chelsea was and what she'd been doing with Laura's husband. "Davis," Chelsea repeated. "That name sounds familiar." "My husband works in real estate too," Laura said. "Mark Davis from Prestige Properties. I think you two work together." "Oh yes, Mark." Chelsea's smile became more genuine. "He's wonderful. Such a dedicated family man." I had to admire Laura's self-control. If someone had just praised my cheating spouse's dedication to family, I probably would have thrown a drink in their face. Laura just nodded and said, "Yes. He certainly is always working late, always putting his clients first." Mark appeared at Chelsea's elbow, and the temperature in our little circle seemed to drop several degrees. He looked nervous, his eyes darting between Laura and me, like he was trying to calculate the odds that we'd figured out what was going on. "Honey," Laura said, turning to him with a bright smile. "Look who I met. This is Jake Mitchell, Chelsea's husband. Jake, this is my husband, Mark." We shook hands, and Mark's palm was damp with sweat. "Nice to meet you, Jake. I've heard so much about you." "Funny, I've heard almost nothing about you," I replied, keeping my voice friendly but letting just a hint of edge creep in. "Chelsea doesn't talk much about work when she's home." "Well, you know how it is," Mark said, laughing a little too loudly. "Shop talk can be pretty boring for outsiders." "I'm sure it can be," Laura said smoothly. "That's why I'm so grateful Jake and I found each other tonight. It's nice to talk to someone who understands what it's like being married to such dedicated professionals." The conversation continued for another few minutes, all surface pleasantries and hidden meanings. Chelsea and Mark were clearly uncomfortable with the situation, but they couldn't figure out how to extract themselves without seeming rude. Finally, Chelsea claimed she needed to speak with someone across the room, and they made their escape. "How do you think we did?" Laura asked, watching them retreat. "Perfect," I said. "They're rattled, but not suspicious. They'll spend the rest of the night trying to figure out if we know anything, and tomorrow they'll be even more careless because they'll convince themselves we're too stupid to be a threat." I looked at Laura standing there in her black dress with her knowing smile and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not hope that my marriage could be saved. That ship had sailed the moment Chelsea decided to betray our vows. But hope that maybe, just maybe, justice was possible. 2 weeks after the chamber mixer, Laura called me at the garage with news that made my day considerably brighter. "Mark's taking your wife to his lake house this weekend," she said without preamble. He thinks I'm visiting my sister in Albany, but I'm actually going to be staying at the Marriott downtown with a very good camera and a very clear view of his driveway. How do you know they'll be there? Because I suggested it. I've been playing the devoted wife, telling him how stressed he looks, how he needs a weekend to relax and recharge. I even packed him a bag and made him sandwiches for the trip. I had to laugh. You packed his bag for a weekend with his mistress? I packed his bag with clothes that are 2 sizes too small and sandwiches made with expired mayonnaise. If he's going to cheat on me, he's going to be uncomfortable while he does it. The lake house had been Mark's pride and joy since he'd bought it 3 years ago. A modern glass and cedar structure perched on the shores of Crystal Lake, about 30 miles outside Lakefield. He'd shown me pictures at the office Christmas party, bragging about the heated floors and the wine cellar and the hot tub on the deck. At the time, I'd felt a stab of envy for a man who could afford such luxuries. Now, I just felt disgust. "What's the plan?" I asked. "Saturday night, they'll be there together, probably drinking wine and congratulating themselves on how clever they are. I'll get photos of them arriving, photos of them on the deck, photos of them leaving Sunday morning. Clear, undeniable evidence that they're having an affair, and then we decide how we want to use it." Saturday evening found me at Murphy's Diner again, nursing a cup of coffee and waiting for Laura's call. She'd positioned herself at a bed and breakfast across the lake with a telephoto lens and a clear line of sight to Mark's property. I was supposed to be her backup, ready to drive over if something went wrong. But mostly, I was just trying not to think about what my wife was doing in another man's house. My phone buzzed at 8:30. "They're here," Laura said. "Just pulled up in his BMW. Your wife's carrying an overnight bag." "How do they look?" "Happy, relaxed, like they don't have a care in the world." There was a pause, and I could hear the camera clicking. "She's wearing a white sundress, very pretty, very inappropriate for October, but I suppose she's planning to spend most of the weekend indoors." The updates continued throughout the evening. Mark grilling steaks on the deck while Chelsea set the table. The two of them sharing wine and watching the sunset. Chelsea in a bikini, climbing into the hot tub despite the cool weather. Each detail was like a small knife in my chest, but I forced myself to listen, to remember, to let the anger build. "They're going inside now," Laura reported around 11. "Lights just went on in the master bedroom." "I don't need to hear about that part," I said quickly. "No, I suppose you don't. I'll call you in the morning when they leave." I spent Saturday night at my garage working on an engine rebuild that didn't need to be finished until the following week. It was better than sitting at home in the bed I'd shared with Chelsea for 12 years, wondering if she was doing things with Mark that she'd stopped doing with me months ago. Laura called at 10 Sunday morning. "They're loading up the car. Your wife looks very satisfied with herself." "Did you get everything you needed?" "Oh, yes. Enough photos to wallpaper a courthouse. The question now is what we do with them." I'd been thinking about that all night, and I had some ideas. Dark ideas. The kind of ideas that would have shocked the man I'd been 2 weeks ago, but seemed perfectly reasonable to the man I was becoming. "I think it's time we started letting other people in on the secret," I said. Chelsea's best friend, Jenna Hartley, had always rubbed me the wrong way. She was one of those women who thrived on drama and gossip, the type who would ask how you were doing just so she could compare your problems to her own and find yours wanting. She and Chelsea had been friends since college, and I'd learned early in our marriage that anything I told Chelsea would eventually make its way to Jenna, usually in a distorted form that made me look like either a saint or a villain, depending on Jenna's mood. But Jenna's love of gossip was exactly what made her perfect for what Laura and I had planned. I found her at the Starbucks on Main Street Monday morning, holding court at her usual table with 2 other women from Chelsea's book club. Jenna was in her element, gesticulating wildly as she told some story about her neighbor's divorce, her voice carrying across the coffee shop like she was performing for an audience. "Jake," she called out when she spotted me. "What are you doing here? I thought you only drank gas station coffee." "Had to pick up something for Chelsea," I said, approaching their table with what I hoped looked like reluctance. "She's been working so hard lately, I thought I'd surprise her with her favorite drink." "Aw, that's so sweet," said one of the other women. "You're such a good husband." "I try to be," I said, and let a little sadness creep into my voice. Though sometimes I wonder if she notices. Jenna's antenna went up immediately. She was like a shark sensing blood in the water. "What do you mean?" I glanced around nervously, as if checking to make sure no one was listening. I probably shouldn't say anything. It's just, she's been so distant lately. Always working late, always on her phone, always too tired to spend time together. "Oh, honey," Jenna said, her eyes lighting up with the prospect of fresh drama. "That's just stress. The real estate market is crazy right now. I'm sure you're right. I said it's just hard sometimes, you know? Like last weekend, she said she had to work Saturday and Sunday, but when I drove by the office Sunday morning, her car wasn't there." This was a lie, of course. I knew exactly where Chelsea had been Sunday morning, but Jenna didn't know that. "Maybe she was showing houses," one of the other women suggested. "Maybe," I said doubtfully. I found this receipt in her purse when I was looking for gum." I pulled out one of the hotel receipts Tony had given me, the one from 3 weeks ago. "I don't understand why she'd be at the Lakeside Motel. We live 20 minutes away." Jenna practically lunged across the table to grab the receipt. Her eyes widened as she read it, and I could see her mind racing, connecting dots, building theories. "Jake," she said carefully, "this receipt is made out to Mark Davis." I know. That's what's so weird about it. Why would Chelsea have a receipt from her coworker? The three women exchanged glances loaded with meaning. They knew something I was pretending not to know, and the power of that secret was intoxicating to them. "I'm sure there's a perfectly innocent explanation," Jenna said, but her tone suggested she believed no such thing. Maybe they were showing property to a client together at the Lakeside Motel. Well, maybe the client was from out of town. I nodded like this made sense, like I was grasping at straws to avoid thinking the unthinkable. "You're probably right. I'm just being paranoid." But I could see in their faces that the seed had been planted. By evening, half the women in Lakefield would know that Chelsea Mitchell had been at a motel with Mark Davis. By tomorrow, the other half would know too. And by the end of the week, the story would have grown and mutated until it bore only a passing resemblance to the truth. But the essential facts would remain. I bought Chelsea's favorite latte and drove to her office, playing the part of the devoted husband, bringing his wife a mid-morning treat. She was at her desk when I arrived, looking beautiful and professional in a navy blue suit I'd never seen before. "Jake, what a nice surprise," she said, accepting the coffee with a smile that might have been genuine. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion. I was just thinking about you." She seemed touched, and for a moment I almost felt guilty about what I was setting in motion. Then I remembered the photos from the lake house, the sound of her voice on that midnight phone call, the 8 months of lies and deception, and the guilt evaporated. "You're so sweet," she said, standing up to give me a kiss. "I don't deserve you." "No," I agreed silently. "You really don't." The beauty of small-town gossip is its efficiency. Information spreads through social networks like water through a sponge, reaching every corner of the community within days. By Wednesday, I could see the effects of my conversation with Jenna in the way people looked at Chelsea when we went to dinner at Romano's. In the carefully neutral way the bank teller greeted her when she made a deposit, in the sudden silence that fell over conversations when she walked into a room. Chelsea felt it too. I could see it in the way she checked her phone obsessively, the way she snapped at me over minor things, the way she kept asking if I'd heard any weird rumors about her lately. "People in this town have nothing better to do than gossip," she complained Thursday night as we sat in our living room watching television. "Jenna called me today asking all these strange questions about work, about whether I'd been collaborating closely with Mark on any projects. What did you tell her? The truth? That Mark and I work together professionally, nothing more." She looked at me sideways. You haven't been saying anything, have you? About us having problems or anything like that? What problems? I asked innocently. I didn't know we had problems. We don't, that's what I mean. But people seem to think I don't know what they think. I could have ended her suffering right then. I could have told her I knew about the affair, demanded an explanation, given her a chance to come clean and maybe salvage something from our marriage. Instead, I reached over and took her hand. Don't worry about what people think, I said. We know the truth. That's all that matters. She squeezed my hand gratefully, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even the satisfaction of revenge. Just a cold, empty space where my love for her used to be. Meanwhile, Laura was working her own angle. She'd started volunteering at Mark's kids' school, becoming friendly with the other mothers, positioning herself as the innocent wife who had no idea what her husband was really doing. She was particularly effective with the women who worked in the school office, the ones who saw everything and remembered everything and loved nothing more than a juicy piece of gossip. I'm a little worried about Mark, she confided to the school secretary during a PTA meeting. He's been working such long hours lately, coming home exhausted and distracted. I'm starting to wonder if he's having some kind of midlife crisis. Oh, honey, the secretary said. Men that age do tend to go a little crazy. My ex-husband started buying sports cars and dating his secretary when he turned 40. Mark's not dating anyone, Laura said quickly. At least, I don't think he is, though he has been getting a lot of phone calls at odd hours. And he bought new cologne last month, which was strange because he's used the same brand for years. The secretary's eyes lit up with interest. New cologne, you say? And new clothes? Expensive ones. I found a receipt for a shirt that cost more than I spend on groceries in a week. By Friday, the gossip network had connected the dots. Mark Davis was acting suspicious. Chelsea Mitchell was acting suspicious. They worked together. They'd been seen at a motel together. The math was simple, even for people who'd never been good at math. Laura called me Friday evening with an update. Mark's been fielding phone calls all day from concerned friends asking if everything's okay at home. He's starting to panic. What about Chelsea? According to my sources at the salon, she's been asking around about the best divorce lawyers in town. Apparently, she thinks you're getting ready to leave her. This was rich. Chelsea was worried that I might divorce her while she was actively cheating on me. The irony was so perfect I almost laughed out loud. Are you ready for Phase 2? Laura asked. Phase 2 involved direct confrontation, forcing Mark and Chelsea to make choices to either end their affair or escalate it to the point where they'd make fatal mistakes. It was riskier than the gossip campaign, but it was also more likely to produce the kind of dramatic results we were looking for. I'm ready, I said. Good, because tomorrow night we're going to give them something to really talk about. The Lakefield Harvest Festival was the social event of the year, a weekend-long celebration that drew people from 3 counties to enjoy carnival rides, local bands, and enough fried food to clog the arteries of a small army. Chelsea and I had attended together for the past 5 years, and she'd been looking forward to this one for weeks, planning her outfit and making dinner reservations at the festival's beer garden. What she didn't know was that Laura and I had been making plans of our own. We met at the festival entrance Saturday evening, Laura looking stunning in a green dress that brought out her eyes, me wearing the one good suit I owned that wasn't stained with motor oil. We'd agreed to arrive separately and run into each other by accident, just 2 lonely spouses whose partners were too busy with work to spend time at community events. "Jake!" Laura called out, waving as if she was genuinely surprised to see me. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Chelsea's working late again," I said with a rueful smile. "Some big client emergency. I almost stayed home, but I figured I should get out of the house. Mark's working too. Seems like everyone in real estate is having emergencies this weekend." We bought tickets and wandered into the festival together, making casual conversation and stopping to watch the local high school marching band perform on the main stage. To anyone observing us, We looked like exactly what we were pretending to be. Two people enjoying each other's company without any romantic undertones. But I was watching the crowd, looking for familiar faces, waiting for word to spread that Jake Mitchell and Laura Davis had been seen together at the festival. In a town like Lakefield, that information would reach Chelsea and Mark within hours. "There's something I need to tell you," Laura said as we shared a funnel cake near the Ferris wheel. "I hired a private investigator last week." I tried to look surprised. "You did?" "I found some things in Mark's car. Credit card receipts, a hotel key card he forgot to throw away. I needed to know for sure." She pulled out her phone and showed me one of the photos Tony had taken. This one, showing Chelsea and Mark kissing in the parking lot of Romano's restaurant. "I'm sorry, Jake. I know this must be hard to see." "Jesus," I whispered, staring at the photo like it was the first time I'd seen evidence of the affair. "How long has this been going on?" "At least 8 months, maybe longer. My investigator has dozens of photos, hotel receipts, phone records showing calls between them at all hours." Laura put her hand on my arm in a gesture of comfort. "I know how you're feeling right now. The betrayal, the anger, the sense that everything you believed about your life was a lie." "I don't understand," I said, letting my voice crack slightly. "I thought we were happy. I mean, we had problems, but I never thought she would with him. They're very good at hiding it. If I hadn't found that hotel keycard, I might never have suspected anything." We sat in silence for a few minutes, two betrayed spouses processing the destruction of our marriages. Around us, families enjoyed the festival. Children laughed on carnival rides. Couples shared cotton candy and stolen kisses. The contrast between their happiness and our apparent misery was almost poetic. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I don't know yet. Confront him, I suppose. File for divorce. Try to figure out how to tell the kids that their father is a cheating bastard without completely destroying their relationship with him. Maybe we should confront them together." I suggested present a united front, make it harder for them to lie their way out of it. Laura considered this. "That's not a bad idea. When?" "Tomorrow night. Chelsea thinks I'm working late at the garage. I bet Mark told you he's working late too." "He did, actually. Said he had to finish some paperwork for a Monday morning closing." "Perfect. We'll catch them together wherever they're meeting. No more lies, no more excuses, just the truth." Laura nodded grimly. It's time they faced the consequences of their choices. As we walked back toward the festival entrance, I spotted Jenna Hartley near the ring toss game, her eyes wide with interest as she watched Laura and me leave together. By tomorrow morning, half the town would know that the two betrayed spouses had found each other and were apparently planning their next move. Chelsea and Mark were about to discover that their secret wasn't as secret as they'd thought, and once that happened, they'd either end the affair or double down on it in ways that would give Laura and me all the ammunition we needed to destroy them completely. I was betting on the latter. People like Chelsea and Mark always thought they were smarter than everyone else, right up until the moment their world came crashing down around them. Sunday evening, Laura and I sat in my pickup truck across the street from the Lakeside Motel, watching the parking lot through binoculars like a couple of private detectives in a bad movie. Mark's BMW was parked in front of room 12, the same room he'd been renting for his trysts with Chelsea for the past 8 months. "They've been in there for 2 hours, Laura said, checking her watch. "How long do you want to wait until they come out?" "I want them to see us together, to understand that we know everything." Laura had changed clothes since the festival, trading her green dress for jeans and a black sweater that made her look younger and somehow more dangerous. She'd also brought a bottle of wine, claiming we might as well be comfortable while we waited for our cheating spouses to finish their business. "I keep thinking about the first time I suspected something was wrong," she said, taking a sip of wine from a plastic cup. Mark came home with lipstick on his collar, and when I asked him about it, he said he'd hugged a client who was emotional about selling her late husband's house. It was such a specific lie, so detailed and sympathetic that I almost believed him. Chelsea's been telling me she's working late 3 nights a week for the past 6 months, I said. Always some urgent client issue, always apologizing for missing dinner or coming home exhausted. I actually felt sorry for her, thought she was under too much pressure at work. They must think we're incredibly stupid or incredibly trusting. Same thing, I suppose. The motel room door opened and Chelsea emerged first, looking around nervously before walking quickly toward her car. She was wearing the white sundress from the lake house photos, completely inappropriate for October weather, but perfect for what she'd been doing for the past 2 hours. Mark followed a few minutes later, adjusting his tie and smoothing his hair like he was getting ready for a business meeting instead of going home to lie to his wife and children. "Showtime," Laura said, and we got out of the truck. They saw us coming from 50 feet away, and the expressions on their faces were worth every moment of pain and humiliation I'd endured over the past 8 months. Chelsea went pale, her mouth falling open in shock. Mark actually stumbled, nearly dropping his car keys as he tried to process what he was seeing. "Hello, honey," Laura said to Mark, her voice calm and pleasant. "How was your evening at the office?" "Laura, I can explain." "Oh, I'm sure you can. You're very good at explanations. Very creative." She turned to Chelsea with a smile that could have frozen fire. "And you must be the client emergency that's been keeping my husband so busy lately." Chelsea looked at me desperately, as if I might somehow rescue her from this situation. "Jake, this isn't what it looks like." "Really?" I said. "Because it looks like my wife and your husband just spent the evening in a cheap motel room. What exactly am I missing?" The crude language hit her like a slap. In 12 years of marriage, I'd never spoken to her that way, never used that tone of voice. But then again, in 12 years of marriage, she'd never betrayed me with another man. "We need to talk," Mark said, trying to regain some control of the situation. "All of us like adults." "Adults," Laura repeated thoughtfully. "Yes, adults take responsibility for their actions. Adults tell the truth. Adults don't sneak around behind their spouses' backs for 8 months, lying and cheating and stealing money to pay for hotel rooms." "You don't understand the situation," Chelsea said, finding her voice. "Jake and I have been having problems for years. We've grown apart. We want different things, so you decided to work through those problems by my husband." Chelsea flinched at Laura's language, but she pressed on. "Marriage is complicated. Sometimes people find connections with others that they can't find at home." "Connections," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling it now?" "Jake, please, if you'd just listen." "I've been listening for 8 months. Every time you told me you were working late. Every time you claimed you were too tired to talk. Every time you made me feel like I was the problem in our marriage. I listened to all of it." Mark stepped forward, trying to insert himself into the conversation. "Look, nobody meant for this to happen. Sometimes these things just develop naturally." "Naturally," Laura's voice rose for the first time. "There's nothing natural about betraying your family, stealing money from joint accounts, and lying to your children about where you spend your evenings." "The kids don't know anything about this," Mark said defensively. "The kids know their father is never home anymore. They know their parents don't sleep in the same bed. They know something is wrong, even if they don't understand what it is." I watched this exchange with a growing sense of satisfaction. This was exactly what I'd hoped for. Chelsea and Mark exposed, forced to defend the indefensible, their carefully constructed lies crumbling under the weight of truth. "What do you want from us?" Chelsea asked, tears starting to form in her eyes. "What do you want us to say?" "I want you to understand that actions have consequences," I said. I want you to know that you can't just destroy people's lives and walk away without paying a price." "What kind of price?" Mark asked, and I could hear the fear in his voice. Laura and I exchanged glances. We'd discussed this moment extensively, planned exactly what we'd say when the time came. "We'll be in touch," Laura said finally. "Both of you, very soon." And with that, we walked back to my truck, leaving Chelsea and Mark standing in the motel parking lot with the wreckage of their secret relationships scattered around them like broken glass. The next few days passed in a blur of lawyers, bank statements, and increasingly desperate phone calls from Chelsea, begging me to talk things through like rational adults. I ignored most of her calls, letting them go to voicemail so I could listen to her voice crack as she tried to explain away 8 months of systematic betrayal. Laura and I met daily now, sometimes at Murphy's Diner, sometimes at the park where her kids played after school, always in public where people could see us together. We weren't trying to hide our friendship anymore. In fact, we wanted everyone in Lakefield to know that the two betrayed spouses had found each other and were planning their response together. "Mark's been sleeping in the guest room," Laura reported Wednesday afternoon as we watched her daughter Emma play on the swings. "He keeps trying to convince me that the affair was just a mistake, a moment of weakness that spiraled out of control." "What did you tell him? That 8 months isn't a moment? And paying for hotel rooms with our joint credit card isn't weakness, it's theft." I had to admire Laura's precision with language. She had a way of cutting through that I found both attractive and intimidating. "Chelsea's been telling people that our marriage was already over. I said that we'd been living like roommates for years, and the affair was just the final nail in the coffin. How generous of her to put you both out of your misery, right? I should probably thank her for her sacrifice." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Emma and her younger brother play with the other kids. It occurred to me that this was the most relaxed I'd felt in months, sitting here with a woman who understood exactly what I was going through, who shared my anger and my desire for justice. "I've been thinking about what we discussed," Laura said eventually, "about making sure they face real consequences. And I think it's time we stopped being subtle." The plan Laura outlined was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its potential impact. We would attend the upcoming Prestige Properties Awards banquet together, the annual black tie event where the company recognized its top performers and biggest deals. Chelsea and Mark would both be there. Chelsea was nominated for an award, and Mark was presenting one of the categories. We'll arrive together, sit together, make it clear to everyone in their professional circle that we know about the affair and we're supporting each other through the aftermath. Laura explained. "Their colleagues, their boss, their biggest clients, everyone will see us and understand what's been going on." "Won't that hurt your reputation too? People knowing that Mark cheated on you?" Laura's smile was sharp as a blade. "Jake, I'm not the one who broke my marriage vows. I'm not the one who stole money to pay for hotel rooms. I'm not the one who lied to my children and betrayed my family. I have nothing to be ashamed of." She was right. Of course, the shame belonged entirely to Chelsea and Mark. Laura and I were just making sure that shame was properly distributed. "There's something else," Laura continued. "I've been going through Mark's financial records, and I found some interesting discrepancies. Money missing from client accounts, expense reports that don't match actual receipts, credit card charges that he claimed were business expenses but were actually personal purchases. He's been embezzling small amounts, nothing that would trigger an audit, but enough to constitute a pattern of theft. Enough to get him fired and possibly prosecuted if the right people found out about it." I stared at her in amazement. "How did you find all this?" "I've been doing the books for his business for 3 years. I know where every penny goes, and I know when money goes missing." She pulled a folder from her purse and handed it to me. Copies of everything. Bank statements, credit card bills, expense reports, client account summaries. Everything you need to destroy his career. The folder felt heavy in my hands, weighted with the power to ruin Mark Davis completely. Not just his marriage, Not just his reputation, but his entire professional life. What about Chelsea? What about her? You have anything on her? Laura's smile turned predatory. Oh, Jake, I have so much more than financial records. I have photos, videos, recorded phone conversations, text messages, hotel receipts, jewelry purchase records. I have enough evidence to prove that your wife has been conducting an affair with a married man for 8 months, using company resources to facilitate their meetings, and lying to clients about her availability while she was off my husband. I opened the folder and began reading through the documents Laura had compiled. The level of detail was staggering. She documented every hotel stay, every expensive dinner, every piece of jewelry Mark had bought for Chelsea with money stolen from his clients. It was a masterpiece of investigation, the kind of evidence that could destroy 2 careers and 2 reputations with surgical precision. When do we do this? I asked. Saturday night, the awards banquet in front of everyone who matters in their professional world. And after that, Jake, we watch them burn. The Prestige Properties Awards banquet was held at the Lakefield Country Club, a sprawling brick building that had been the social center of the town's elite for nearly a century. I'd never been inside before. Country club memberships were for people who made more money than auto mechanics, but Laura had secured us tickets through her connections in the real estate community. I rented a tuxedo for the occasion, and Laura wore a stunning silver dress that made her look like a movie star from the 1940s. We arrived fashionably late, making our entrance just as the cocktail hour was winding down, and people were beginning to take their seats for dinner. The reaction was immediate and electric. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as people recognized us and began connecting the dots. Jake Mitchell, the mechanic whose wife was nominated for Salesperson of the Year. Laura Davis, the interior designer whose husband was presenting the Community Service Award, together at an event where their spouses were supposed to be celebrating their professional achievements. Is that Jake Mitchell with Mark Davis's wife? I heard someone whisper. Why are they here together? Where are Chelsea and Mark? We found our table. Laura had arranged for us to be seated directly in Mark's line of sight when he gave his presentation, and settled in to enjoy the show. Chelsea was 3 tables away, wearing a black dress that probably cost more than I made in a week, her face pale with shock as she watched us take our seats. Mark was at the head table with the other presenters, and I could see him whispering urgently to the man next to him, probably trying to figure out how to handle this unexpected development. Ladies and gentlemen, the Master of Ceremonies announced, please welcome Mark Davis to present this year's Community Service Award. Mark walked to the podium on unsteady legs, his usual confidence replaced by obvious nervousness. He fumbled with his notes, cleared his throat several times, and kept glancing in our direction like he was expecting us to stand up and start shouting accusations. The Community Service Award, he began, his voice cracking slightly, goes to the real estate professional who has made the greatest contribution to our local community through volunteer work and charitable giving. As Mark droned through his prepared remarks, Laura leaned over and whispered in my ear, "Are you ready?" I nodded, my heart racing with anticipation and adrenaline. This year's winner, Mark continued, has donated countless hours to local charities, organized fundraising events, and consistently demonstrated the values that make our community strong. The winner is... Laura stood up. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent ballroom. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think everyone here deserves to know the truth about the man giving this presentation." The silence that followed was deafening. Mark stood frozen at the podium, his mouth open, his face turning red with embarrassment and panic. "My name is Laura Davis," she continued, "and Mark Davis is my husband. Or rather, he was my husband until I discovered that he's been having an affair with Chelsea Mitchell for the past 8 months, using money stolen from his client accounts to pay for hotel rooms and expensive gifts." The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs and gasps. I saw Chelsea half rise from her chair, then sink back down as if her legs wouldn't support her. "I have photographs," Laura said, pulling out a manila envelope. Hotel receipts, bank records showing unauthorized withdrawals from client accounts, text messages, phone records, 8 months of evidence documenting a systematic pattern of adultery, theft, and professional misconduct. Mark tried to regain control. "Laura, please, this isn't the place." "This is exactly the place," she said firmly. "These people trusted you with their business, their money, their professional reputations. They deserve to know what kind of man you really are." I stood up beside her, and the room's attention shifted to me. "My name is Jake Mitchell," I said. "Chelsea Mitchell is my wife. Or was my wife until she decided that her marriage vows meant less to her than an affair with a married man who steals from his clients." The master of ceremonies tried to restore order. "Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps we should." "No," Laura said sharply. "We've been quiet long enough. We've been protecting their reputations, covering for their lies, making excuses for their behavior. But actions have consequences, and it's time Mark and Chelsea faced theirs." She began distributing copies of the evidence to nearby tables, and I watched as people examined the photographs and documents with growing shock and disgust. These were Chelsea and Mark's colleagues, their clients, their professional peers, the people whose respect and trust they needed to maintain their careers. Chelsea finally found her voice. "This is a private matter," she said, standing up with as much dignity as she could muster. "It has nothing to do with anyone else." "It has everything to do with everyone else," I replied. "When you use company resources to conduct your affair, when you lie to clients about your availability, when you steal money to pay for hotel rooms, it stops being private." Mark abandoned the podium and walked quickly toward the exit, but Laura's voice stopped him. "Don't you want to explain to everyone how you justified stealing from the Hendersons' escrow account to buy jewelry for your mistress?" He turned back, his face twisted with rage. "You vindictive witch! You're going to destroy everything." "No, Mark. You destroyed everything. I'm just making sure everyone knows who's responsible." The confrontation continued for several more minutes, with Chelsea and Mark trying desperately to minimize the damage, while Laura and I methodically destroyed their professional reputations with documented evidence of their misconduct. By the time hotel security arrived to escort us out, half the room was on their phones, spreading the news to colleagues who hadn't been there to witness the spectacle firsthand. As we walked through the country club parking lot, Laura took my arm and smiled with genuine satisfaction. "How do you think that went?" "Better than I'd hoped," I said. "Much better." Behind us, we could hear the chaos continuing inside the ballroom, voices raised in shock and outrage as people processed what they just witnessed. Chelsea and Mark's careers were finished, their reputations destroyed, their professional relationships permanently damaged. Justice, I thought, had finally been served. But we weren't done yet. Not quite. Epilogue. The Price of Betrayal. 6 months later, I was working under the hood of a 1967 Mustang when Laura walked into my garage, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing a smile that still made my heart skip a beat. "How's the restoration coming along?" she asked, handing me one of the cups. "Slow but steady. Should be ready for the car show next month." We'd been seeing each other regularly since the awards banquet, not as conspirators planning revenge, but as 2 people who'd found something unexpected in the wreckage of their marriages. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was the possibility of love, which was more than either of us had expected to find. "Any word from Chelsea?" Laura asked. "Her lawyer called yesterday. She wants to discuss the division of assets again." I wiped my hands on a rag and took a sip of coffee. Apparently, her new job in Albany doesn't pay as well as her old one. Chelsea had been forced to leave Prestige Properties within a week of the awards banquet. The scandal had made it impossible for her to maintain client relationships, and the company couldn't afford to keep her on staff. She'd found work with a small firm 2 hours away, but her reputation had followed her, limiting her opportunities and earning potential. What about Mark? Still unemployed as far as I know. Turns out that stealing from client accounts is a career-littering move in the real estate business. Mark had been fired immediately after the banquet, and the state licensing board had revoked his real estate license, pending an investigation into his financial misconduct. He'd avoided criminal charges by paying back the money he'd stolen, but his career was effectively over. "The kids are adjusting well," Laura said. "Emma asked me yesterday if you were going to be her new daddy." "What did you tell her?" "That it's too early to know for sure, but that I like you very much, and I hope you'll be part of our lives for a long time." I sat down my coffee cup and pulled Laura into my arms, kissing her gently. She tasted like hope and new beginnings, like the possibility that sometimes good things could come from bad situations. "I have something to tell you," she said when we broke apart. "What?" "Mark called last night. He wants to reconcile. Says he's learned his lesson, that he understands now how much he hurt me and the kids. He's been going to therapy, working on himself, ready to be the husband and father we deserve." I felt a stab of jealousy and fear. "What did you tell him?" Laura's smile was radiant. "I told him that some mistakes can't be undone, some trust can't be rebuilt, and some people don't deserve second chances." She kissed me again, longer this time, with more promise. I told him I'd found someone better. As I held Laura in my arms, surrounded by the familiar smells of motor oil and metal, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. The betrayal, the anger, the carefully planned revenge, the public humiliation of two people who'd thought they were clever enough to get away with destroying their families. Chelsea and Mark had gotten exactly what they deserved. They'd lost their marriages, their careers, their reputations, and their standing in the community. They'd learned that actions have consequences, that betrayal comes with a price, and that sometimes the people you underestimate are the ones who end up having the last laugh. But more than that, they'd inadvertently given Laura and me something precious: each other. In trying to destroy their marriages for their own selfish pleasure, they'd created the circumstances that allowed two damaged people to find healing and hope together. "So, what happens now?" Laura asked. I looked around my garage, at the car I was restoring, at the business I'd built with my own hands, at the woman who'd helped me reclaim my self-respect and my faith in the possibility of honest love. "Now," I said, "we build something better than what we had before." And as Laura laughed and kissed me again, I knew that we would. We'd build something strong and honest and real, something that could withstand whatever challenges life threw at us. Something that Chelsea and Mark, for all their selfishness and scheming, had never been capable of building themselves. In the end, that was the best revenge of all.